Hello everyone. Today we are going to take Unit 7 of Skillful Listening and Speaking 4. You can find the link to download the book in the description below. The unit is entitled Expanse. What does expanse mean? An expanse is a wide continuous area of something. Here the expanse is that of wide continuous greenery. So an expanse can mean an area, wide space, wide field. On page 68 of your student book, you will find a vocabulary preview. And in exercise number 1, we need to fill in the blanks with these words. So before doing the exercise, we will revise some of these words. So number 1, we have aloof, which is an adjective. Aloof means not friendly or cool and distant. So I can say, I am not friends with her. She is quite aloof. This means that she is not friendly. It's like the picture before you of the grumpy cat. Someone who is distant, who isn't friendly with people. Number 2, colossal. Colossal is an adjective and it means extremely large and it's often related to architecture. So if I say, for example, this building is colossal, it means that it's very large or extremely large, like the one in the picture before you. Considerable. Considerable is an adjective and it means notably large in size, amount, or extent. I could say, for example, he gave me a considerable amount of money. So this means that he gave me a large amount of money. And then gargantuan. Gargantuan is an adjective and it's obsolete. Obsolete means that it's not used nowadays anymore. Gargantuan means enormous. So there is a story of a giant named Gargantuan and it's written by Francois Rabelais and it's about a giant who has a gargantuan appetite. So this means that he is insatiably hungry, as you can see in the picture. And then we have extensive. Extensive means covering or affecting a large area. So it means large in extent, range, or amount. So I could say, for example, the trees cover an extensive area of my land. And then vast, which is an adjective that most of you probably know, it means of very great extent or quantity. And transcontinental. Transcontinental is an adjective. As you know, continent is a noun, and transcontinental means that it crosses a continent, and it's usually used with railways, the railways upon which the train goes. And a transcontinental railroad means that it's a railroad that connects a whole continent, as you can see. It crosses a whole continent. And then proximity, which means nearness in space, time, or relationship. The opposite of proximity is remoteness. It is the state of being distant from something, as evident in the picture. So proximity is القرب and remoteness is البعد. So on page 68 of your student books, you will find this exercise. Pause the video, do the exercise, and then revise your answers with me. So the first sentence is the first, and then there's a space. Railroad in the word was the Pacific Railroad, which connected Iowa in the Midwestern United States with the Pacific Ocean. So here he is talking about a railroad that connects the Midwestern United States with the Pacific Ocean. So this means that it's transcontinental. It's a transcontinental railroad. Number 2, Mount Everest can be described as a mountain of, and then there is a space, proportions. So we can say colossal. As we have said, colossal means very large, and here he is describing a mountain, so it could be colossal. It could also be gargantuan, but colossal is better suited here. Then number 3, technology is the key to overcoming the, and then there is a space, of places such as Alaska or Siberia. So Alaska and Siberia, they are very far away from us. So here technology is the key to overcoming the remoteness of these places, because a plane, for instance, can take you right to Alaska or Siberia in a couple of hours. So it's a means of overcoming these places being so far away or being so distant from us. Number 4, he has and then there is a space, knowledge of Russian art history. Here the answer would be extensive. Usually we use extensive with knowledge. If someone has an extensive knowledge of something, this means that he is very well read and that he knows a lot about this issue or this thing. And number 5, the hurricane caused, and then there is a space, damage to all coastal towns. So here he wants to say that it has caused a lot of damage. So we can say considerable damage. As we have said, considerable means large in amount. Number 6, they really are friendly people. However, they are little, and then there is a space in the beginning. Distant. It will be aloof. Number 7, the towns, and then there is a space, to the sea, made fishing an important source of income. So if fishing is an important source of income, this means that the town is near the sea. So the town's proximity. The town is close to the sea. Number 8, these animals are, and then there is a space, in scale, ranging from 5 to 7 meters in length. Gargantuan. Okay, because we are describing animals. And as I've said, gargantuan is obsolete. So we can use another word. We can say vast, for example. Number 9, exploring the, and then there is a space, expanse of our galaxy is humankind's next adventure in space. He is describing the expanse of our galaxy. So here it's vast. It's a vast expanse. This means that it's very large. And number 10, there is nothing more beautiful than looking down on a valley from on a mountaintop. From high up. High up was part of the box in exercise number 1. We didn't discuss it because most of you know it, of course. Exercise number 2. Which 3 words are synonyms of enormous? The 3 words are colossal, gargantuan, and vast. Now we move on to listening number 1, the Trans-Siberian Railway. We are going to listen to the track, but before we listen to it, we need to know the exercises that we are going to do while we are listening to it. So the first thing that I want you to do while you are listening to the track is the exercise that's found on page 68. I want you to write down notes about these following numbers. Okay, we have a list of numbers, a list of 8 numbers, and each of these numbers are mentioned in the track. You just need to write a note or a sentence next to each of these numbers. The second thing that I want you to do is related to the critical thinking box that you can find on page 69. On page 69, he is talking about facts and opinions. A fact is supported by evidence or can easily be proven to be true through observation, experience, or comparison against evidence. So a fact means حقيقة. In contrast, an opinion may be the point of view of an individual person or a large group, so it can be refuted. So if you can take a look at the critical thinking skills section on page 69, he says opinions are often signaled by some phrases like from my point of view, to my mind, I would say, as far as I'm concerned. All of these phrases signal that you are going to talk about your own opinion, not a well-known fact. However, sometimes there are no signal words or phrases, and sometimes opinions are also supported by evidence, so you need to use other ways to ascertain that a statement is opinion and not fact. So what are these other ways? Consider your own experience or knowledge. Listen for evidence that is presented by the speaker. So if, for example, someone says that Ain Shams University is located in Cairo, this is a fact. This is not an opinion. But if, for example, he says, from my point of view, Ain Shams University offers a great educational experience. This is an opinion, not a fact, because it will differ from one person to another. So before listening to the track, I want you to read the sentences in exercise number 2 on page 69. Okay, these are 6 sentences, and you need to read them. And while you are listening to the track, you need to write whether they are fact or opinion. You will know when you listen to the track because facts will usually be supported by evidence, while opinions will usually be preceded by some phrases like from my point of view and so on, and will not have any evidence. So let's listen to track number 1.
Track 8, Unit 7, Listening 1, The Trans-Siberian Railway.
The Trans-Siberian Railway is a transcontinental Russian railway network that connects hundreds of towns and cities in the European and Asian parts of Russia. Stretching out from the centre of Moscow to Vladivostok on the Sea of Japan, the 9,289 kilometre, that's approaching 6,000 miles journey, will take 7 days to complete, as one passes through 7 time zones and 2 continents. It is the most extensive railroad in the world and demonstrates just how vast Russia actually is. For this week's podcast, we wanted to discuss why so many people refer to it as the Special Railway. With me here are 2 people we believe can shed some light on the topic. John Ridgway, a freelance journalist, and Patrick Steele, a professor of Russian history. Patrick, may I start by asking you a question, which I will ask both of you. Why do you consider the Trans-Siberian to be so special?
Well, considering the history of the Trans-Siberian and what the possibility of its existence meant to the Russian ruling family at the end of the 19th century, I would say that it has had a remarkable role to play in the development of Russia as a nation. When the Tsar Alexander III ordered the building of this great railway, he promised that it would be the soul of Russia. It was his dream to unite the country by colonizing the huge barren area from the Urals to the Pacific.
Wow, that was certainly a big task.
It certainly was. The Trans-Siberian winds across the most inhospitable parts of Asia, which were largely uninhabited until the early part of the 20th century. Understandably, the remoteness of this vast land area isolated many groups of Russians across 2 continents, making it very difficult to rule as a nation.
And how did the railway make this possible?
With a continuous railroad up and running in 1914, 5 million people, most of them peasants, emigrated by train from European Russia to Siberia. What once used to be a 10-month journey by horse and cart was by that time possible in 72 hours by rail. Goods, services and raw materials could be transported back and forth relatively quickly, which helped boost the economy. In terms of uniting the Russian people and increasing the proximity of Siberia to the capital, I would say that the railway has been fundamental.
John, you do a lot of travelling on the railway, and you also mentioned the word special earlier. I think you were referring to the journey itself, weren't you?
Yes, I was. From my point of view, it is a special experience to travel along this railroad. And I would point to 2 things that, for me, give this journey so much romantic appeal. The first would be the Russian people you meet along the way. Russians are generally misunderstood. They have a reputation of being aloof, but to my mind, when you're on a train with them, they treat you like family. You can spend up to 30 hours together with the same locals. They share any food they have with them that they think you should try. I have even been offered vegetables from a family's garden. They can really shame you with their kindness. I say that quite sincerely. I would say that the scenery may get monotonous at times, but the people do not.
That's really interesting. I've never actually met anyone from Russia. What was the other thing?
The very fact that you have the opportunity to cross 2 continents and see every part of them. Much to my delight, I have witnessed the most breathtaking landscapes. You really must make some stops along the way. I mean, you have the chance to be in the middle of Siberia. When are you ever going to have that opportunity again?
I'm still waiting for that chance. Now, it's also essential to understand how important the Trans-Siberian is to the people of Russia. Patrick, you mentioned this importance earlier as we were setting up the podcast.
Yes, I did. I feel that it's very difficult to speak about the railway without mentioning what it means to the people of this country. I was recently involved in a statistical study of the Trans-Siberian's significance to the country's infrastructure. To give you some examples, 80% of all goods are transported by rail. There is no transcontinental road system in Russia, making it practically impossible to drive from Moscow to Vladivostok.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, it's true. Not surprisingly, most of the quality road systems are based around Moscow and St. Petersburg, which means that driving is only possible over short distances in other parts of the country. Furthermore, many roads in the Asian part of the country simply cannot support heavy goods vehicles, and some do not even have an asphalt surface, making rail the only option for transporting goods.
So really, all long-distance travelling has to be by train.
Well, a lot of Russians have to travel gargantuan distances, and that is only possible by train or plane. As flying is much more expensive and sometimes impractical, depending on the destination, rail is sometimes the only option for the vast majority. Another interesting statistic we uncovered was that Russian railways employ 1.5 million people, a considerable figure that can only be matched by the Russian army. I certainly feel that the special railway refers to the importance it has for the people.
John, your latest article is called The Trans-Siberian Lifeline. Can you tell us something about that?
Yes. What happened was that the economic inactivity in the years following the collapse of the Soviet regime brought a lot of unemployment and hardship to the whole country, especially Siberia. This obliged many Siberians who had no source of earnings to turn to street vending, which in older and more prosperous times was unthinkable. Many of them became what were known as round-trip passengers on the Trans-Siberian Railway, traveling to China, Turkey, and Poland to buy cheap products to resell back home and at the stations along the route.
I can see now that the railroad gave them the means to travel in search of some type of income for their families.
Yes, the city of Novosibirsk became the center of such transactions as hundreds of street vendors from all over Siberia loaded with sacks of cut-price goods waited for trains to transport them hundreds of miles to their destinations and then back to their homes again. Each excursion could mean a 72-hour train ride in third-class carriages and, on average, a 12-hour wait in Novosibirsk for a train connection home.
I'm just looking at the article now, and I can see that one of the photos shows the famous housewives selling food.
Yes, these are the famous babushkas. The railway gave them the opportunity to sell homemade food at the stations, another important source of family income. As a regular traveler on the Trans-Siberian, I can tell you their tasty dishes are much better value for your money than the food served in the restaurants on the trains. So, I will echo Patrick by saying it certainly is what Russians call the railway of the people.
That is all we have time for, I'm afraid. Thank you both so much for coming in to speak to us today. I feel we can now understand more of the big picture and have a better idea why Russians call the Trans-Siberian a special railway.
So back to the exercise on page 68. 9,289 is the distance of the journey between Moscow and Vladivostok. Then the number 7, the length of the journey between Moscow and Vladivostok is 7 days. So number 3 is 2, and here the journey passes through 2 continents, not just 1 continent. And number 4, 10, it took 10 months to travel between European Russia and Siberia by horse or cart. Number 5, we have the number 72. The same journey later took 72 hours by train. Number 6, 80. The train transports 80% of all goods. And number 7, 100.5 million. 100.5 million people are employed by Russian railways. And lastly, number 8, 12. The average waiting time in Novosibirsk for a connection home is 12 hours. Alright, so this was the first exercise. So back to the exercise that depends on your critical thinking. Number 1, the Trans-Siberian Railway played a vital part in uniting Russia as a nation. This is, of course, a fact, because it was supported by several pieces of evidence. Number 2, traveling on the Trans-Siberian is a positive experience. This is an opinion, because it could differ from one person to another. Someone could have a positive experience and another one could have a negative experience. Number 3, the railway plays a crucial role in Russia's infrastructure. Of course, this is a fact. And number 4, the train is the only option for traveling long distances for most Russians. This is also a fact. Number 5, the Trans-Siberian provides many people with a means to make a living. This is a fact. And number 6, the food from the restaurant is not good value for the money. This is of course an opinion, because someone else might like the food. So now we move to track number 2, and it's entitled Why Do People Climb Mountains? It's about mountain climbing. So before we listen to the track, we need to know some of the words or some of the key words that we are going to encounter in the track. Number one, we have compelling. Compelling is an adjective, and it means evoking interest, attention, or admiration in a powerfully irresistible way. This means that it was very interesting. Number two, hazardous. Hazardous is an adjective, and it means risky or dangerous. And then picturesque, which means visually attractive, especially in a quaint or charming way. And it usually describes a place or a building. So if you look at the picture before you, we can say that the view here is picturesque. Before we listen to the track, we need to take a look at page 70 to read the critical thinking part. This part is about statements that need justifications and statements that don't need justifications. Some statements or claims stand alone and do not require further justifications. We can call these self-evident. Self-evident statements do not require justifications. You don't have to prove them. Mountain climbing is problematic, hazardous, and often painful. So here, this sentence doesn't require justification. This is a self-evident statement. Why? Because the speaker doesn't need to elaborate further. He doesn't need to explain why mountain climbing is problematic or dangerous. Most of us know that mountain climbing is a dangerous hobby or a dangerous activity and that it's painful. So he doesn't need to explain this. And usually when a person is speaking about something self-evident, he uses expressions such as naturally, obviously, or of course. So this is a self-evident statement. However, some statements require justification. Otherwise, they may leave the listener puzzled. So we have a statement here. Climbing allows us to create our own reward sequence. If I just say this sentence, some of you might not understand what a reward sequence means here. So we need a justification. For example, he says in the track, an uphill slope represents an incentive and a peak symbolizes achievement. This is an uphill slope, اللي هو منحدر. So it's something that leads uphill. And the peak is the very top of the mountain. So this is why the peak symbolizes achievement. دي اللي هي قمة. لكن the uphill slope, this symbolizes a challenge, an incentive. يعني حافز. حافز إن هو يوصل للقمة. So we get now why mountain climbing is like a reward sequence. The upward slope is an incentive and the peak is the achievement. So it's like a reward sequence. So when he mentioned the justification, we understood the statement. Before listening to the track, you need to read the sentences on page 71, and while you are listening, check the statements that require justification. And then you need to write down the justification that the speaker mentioned. So back to the track, we will listen to the track right now, and you will do the two exercises while you're listening to it.
Track 10, Unit 7, Listening 2. Why do people climb mountains?
Before his fatal mission to climb the colossal Mount Everest in 1924, renowned mountaineer George Lee Mallory was asked why he wanted to climb it. To this question, he gave a short and simple answer: because it is there. Mallory and his climbing partner disappeared when they were only a few hundred meters from the summit. His fate remained unknown until his frozen body was discovered 75 years later. His rather dismissive response to that final question was actually hiding the whole truth of the matter. Why do we climb mountains? The obvious answer would be to say, to get to the top. However, I would say that is simply not the case. It is understandably exciting to reach the summit, but this is only an end. It does not take into consideration the means. Many individuals are mystified about why someone would risk their life going up and down a mountain and then have nothing to show as a result. However, it is not the result that we should be focusing on. You may even suggest that it is the risk involved in the climb. I must say that many climbers admit that they enjoy the adrenaline rush as they face danger. But once again, I would call that an oversimplification. Mountain climbing is problematic, hazardous, and often painful. So why do people do it? People climb mountains because they love the pursuit itself. The means to this enjoyment consists of many factors. First of all, mountaineering brings a group of people together with a single goal. The group acts as one, and you have to understand your fellow climbers and the situation you're in. Cooperation is needed to succeed, and unity must prevail. Then there is the challenge. Scaling a steep slope is a trial to be overcome, very much like the trials of life. If you see a barrier, you can't pretend it isn't there. You have to get over it or under it. Our next step could be deadly, but it could equally be rewarding. Climbing allows us to create our own reward sequence, a source of satisfaction we can go back to again and again. An uphill slope represents an incentive, and a peak symbolizes achievement. Naturally, climbing also compels us to explore and extend our physical limitations. It also lets us study the interactions between our minds and our bodies. This is a pursuit that allows us to really get to know ourselves and what we are capable of. Let's not overlook the fact that it also allows us to see the splendor of nature. Imagine the beauty of being high up on a mountain peak when the sun begins to rise, and being the first one to see it. There is no greater artist than Mother Nature herself, and there is no better place to appreciate this than from high above on a mountain crest. Oddly enough, there is also another side to climbing a mountain that many people would not think of, and that is creativity. As we make our ascent, we feel like artists creating our own work of art. Making a new route that has never been trodden before gives us the same feeling of originality. Eventually, climbing becomes part of us, and we feel we need to do it. Why do artists paint the pictures they do? They do it because they need to. This possibly explains Mallory's response to that famous question in 1924. Because it is there.
Okay, so now that you have listened to the track, let's revise the answers of the exercises together. Statement number 1. People climb mountains because they love being part of a team. Does this statement require a justification? Yes, it does, because we don't understand why do people who climb mountains like being part of a team. Why are these two things related? We need a justification. Number 2, the challenge of climbing represents the challenges in life. Of course, the statement needs a justification, because we don't understand how the challenge of mountain climbing represents the challenges in life. Number 3, climbing pushes us to our physical limits. This doesn't require a justification because we understand that mountain climbing is quite hard for our physical bodies, so it's self-evident. Number 4, climbing allows a person to get to know him or herself better. Now, this sentence requires justification because we don't understand how mountain climbing can allow us to get to know ourselves better. Number 5, climbing allows us to appreciate the beauty of nature. This is quite self-evident because, of course, mountain climbing happens in nature and you can see a lot of picturesque views around you, so it's self-evident. And number 6, climbing is artistic. Of course, this is pretty ambiguous. We don't understand what he means by it, so it needs justification. So now that we have checked the sentences, we need to write down what justifications he mentioned for each of these sentences. Number 1, people climb mountains because they love being part of a team. The justification that he mentioned is that one of the factors of enjoyment is cooperation. Number 2, the challenge of climbing represents the challenge of life. The justification was that both life and climbing have barriers that we have to overcome. Just like we overcome the problems in our life, mountain climbing includes overcoming barriers. And number 4, climbing allows a person to get to know himself better So the justification is that it compels us to explore and extend our physical limitations. It also lets us study the interactions between our minds and our bodies, so we get to know ourselves better. Number 6, climbing is artistic, and the justification was that we feel like artists and have the same feeling of originality or creativity when we create a new route. So the first part of the language development is about attitude adverbials. Attitude adverbials are a number of adverbs or adverbial phrases that can be used to describe the speaker's attitude to what follows or what goes before in a sentence. Most of them can be placed at the beginning of a clause or within it. So if you take a look at page 72 in your student book, you will find a box, and in that box we will find 2 examples. Example number 1, we have naturally climbing also compels us to explore and extend our physical limitations. Or we can say it's naturally exciting to reach the summit, but this is only an end. So here naturally is the attitude adverbial, because it shows us the attitude of the speaker towards the thing that he is talking about. So the speaker here thinks that it's natural that climbing or mountain climbing compels us to explore and extend our physical limitations. And some adverbs can be used before enough, such as oddly, funnily, strangely, and surprisingly. So we can say, oddly enough, there is also another side to climbing a mountain that many people would not think of, and that is creativity. So here the adverbial was placed before enough, oddly enough, strangely enough, surprisingly enough. And some abstract nouns of emotion can be used after much to my surprise, much to my delight, much to my disgust, much to my dismay, much to my horror. So we can say, for example, much to my delight, I have witnessed the most breathtaking landscapes. So in exercise 1, he wants us to complete the sentences by placing an attitude adverbial in an appropriate position. So we will choose the adverbial according to the context. The appropriate position would be at the beginning of the sentence. So sentence number 1, most of the quality road systems are based around Moscow and St. Petersburg. So here the adverbial would be not surprisingly, because these 2 cities are 2 main cities in Russia. Number 2, the remoteness of this vast land area isolated many groups of Russians across 2 continents, making it very difficult to rule as a nation. So here the appropriate adverbial would be understandably, because in this statement we have a reason for the statement. The remoteness of this land made it difficult to rule Russia as a nation. So this is understandable. And number 3, I believe the Russians are friendly people. Here it would be personally, because this is a personal opinion. So personally, I believe the Russians are friendly people. Or we can say, for example, I personally believe the Russians are friendly people. Number 4, climbing is a dangerous pursuit. This is, of course, undoubtedly. Undoubtedly, climbing is a dangerous pursuit. Or climbing is undoubtedly a dangerous pursuit. Number 5, you should go climbing with a team. Number 5 would be not surprisingly. Not surprisingly, you should go climbing with a team. And the last one, I have never seen anything as beautiful as a sunrise from the top of a mountain crest. Of course, this would be honestly. Honestly, I have never seen anything as beautiful as a sunrise. Or I have honestly never seen anything as beautiful as a sunrise. These are the answers to exercise number 1. Most of these adverbials would be placed at the beginning of the sentence, and we should follow the adverbial with a comma, of course. You should use a comma after each of these adverbials if they are at the beginning of the sentence. And some of them could be placed within the sentence. So the last part of our lesson is about abstract nouns on page 73. An abstract noun is a name given to an emotion, ideal or idea. It has no physical presence. You cannot see, smell, hear, taste, or touch it. So an abstract noun is something that refers to something abstract, something that's not physical. Many abstract nouns are the root for other words. Surprise. This is an abstract noun because it doesn't refer to anything physical. It refers to an emotion. And it's the root for surprising. So here it's the root for another word. while others are formed from a root adjective by adding a suffix. For example, the root adjective is original, and the abstract noun is originality. We have added a suffix here, and now we have an abstract noun. So either the noun could be turned into an adjective, and the noun here is the root, or an adjective could be turned into a noun by adding a suffix. So on page 73 of your student book, you will find exercise number 1, and we need to use the correct form of the words that he has written for us, and these words will likely be abstract nouns. Sometimes we might need to add a negative prefix. So number 1, considering the history of the Trans-Siberian and what the possibility of its, and then there is a space, and he wants to use a noun from exist, of its existence, of course. So what the possibility of its existence meant to the Russian ruling family at the end of the 19th century, I would say that it has had a remarkable role to play in the, and then there is a space, and he wants us to use an abstract noun from develop, of Russia as a nation. So of course here it's development. So possibility, existence, development. Number 2, they can really shame you with their, and he wants to use an abstract noun from kind. Here it would be kindness. And number 3, I certainly feel the special railway refers to the, and then he wants us to use an abstract noun from important. So of course it's importance, or the importance it has for the people. Number 4, what happened was the economic, and he wants to use an abstract noun from active in the years following the collapse of the Soviet regime. What happened after the collapse of the Soviet regime? Of course, there was an economic inactivity. We will have to use a negative prefix. So the abstract noun from active is activity, but we will need to use a negative prefix because here we want to say that after the collapse of the Soviet regime, there was an economic inactivity. And it brought a lot of, here we have employ and hard to the whole country. A lot of unemployment because there is an economic collapse, and hardship. Hardship means difficult times, of course. So we have inactivity, unemployment, and hardship. Number 5, cooperation is needed to succeed, and then we need an abstract noun from unite, must prevail. So of course here is unity. Number 6, climbing allows us to create our own reward sequence, a source of, and he wants the abstract noun from satisfy, so it's satisfaction. A source of satisfaction we can go back to again and again. And lastly, an uphill slope represents an incentive, and the peak symbolizes, and he wants the abstract noun from achieve, is of course achievement. So these are the answers to exercise number 1. Then we have exercise number 2, in which he wants us to place the original root words from exercise 1 in the right column below. So here we have the root words that end with the suffix meant, develop, development, employ, employment, achieve, achievement. And then the root words that end with the suffix action, of course it's satisfy, satisfaction. And then a root word that ends with the suffix y, unite, unity. And a root word that ends with the suffix ness, kind, kindness. And the root word which ends with the suffix ens, exist, existence. And a root word which ends with the suffix ans, important, importance. And a root word which ends with the suffix ship, hard, hardship. And lastly, a root word which ends with the suffix ity, possible, possibility, and active, activity. So it's pretty simple. We just use the original root word and add a suffix to make an abstract noun. The last exercise that we have is number 3, complete the sentences with an abstract noun from exercise number 1. Number 1, we have what started my homesickness was the, and then there is a space, before the course started. I was really bored. He was really bored and started to feel homesick. So there was a period of inactivity. Nothing was happening, so he began to feel bored. Number 2, the Trans-Siberian has partially solved the problem of, and then there is a space, in Siberia. The best word here would be unemployment. Number 3, being in the open air gives me a tremendous sense of satisfaction. So being in the open air satisfies me, makes me feel happy. Number 4, the University Climbing Club came into, and then there is a space in 1989. To come into existence. This is an idiom. Number 5, finishing a climb always gives me a feeling of achievement. And the last one, the aim of these activities is to help students with and then there is a space of new skills, with the development of new skills. So we just choose the abstract noun that is relevant to the context of the sentence. This concludes our lecture today. Thank you for watching this video.